I'm very excited today to be joined by representatives from the State Board of Education, Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. We have two experts from that office, Jim Whiteman and Curtis Hewitt, who are going to be walking through some of the recent changes with licensure. I know you probably have lots of questions. I've been trying to stay on top of some of those changes. So we're very fortunate to have two individuals who are in the weeds day in and day out of educator licensure. So, Jim, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you to get started.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you for inviting us. I'm Jim Whiteman, and I have my colleague Curtis Hewitt with me this morning. We both serve as associate directors in the Office of Educator Licensure. There's our contact information. Our director is Janetta Harper, who was unable to be with us this morning. And so I just want to start out with the State Board of Education website. We've got a QR code up there in the upper right-hand corner. And we now have two separate entities, the Department of Education and Workforce. I know you're all aware of all of these things, but the State Board of Education does have its own website, and that's where you would find all of the information that we're going to be talking about today in regards to licensure. Another thing that I did want to mention is our Educator Essentials newsletter, which comes out once a month. Just came out, it was either yesterday or today, contains some great information in it. We've got readership of well over 100,000. And the thing that is really great from those that study these things tell me is that we've got an open rate of over 66%, which is really great to have. So once again, a QR code there for that. And I would highly recommend subscribing to our Educator Essentials. So, I wanted to talk a little bit. We're going back a little ways historically here to House Bill 33, which was the budget bill passed, became effective July 1st of 2023. And there were several items that were in it that impact human capital resource work. The first one that we wanted to highlight is that the pre-service teacher permit, and that's a permit that any college student in an education program that is going to be working in a pre-K through 12 classroom must obtain this pre-service teacher permit. And the pre-service teacher permit also does allow them to substitute in your districts and be compensated for substituting in your districts. And the one thing that we've been talking about since this became effective with EPPs, educator preparation programs, is that they need to work with their local school districts on how a district would want to use a student teacher to substitute so that the two agents, the two organizations work together on how to make that happen. And if you have any questions as we're going through these, if you want to put them into the chat, Kate's going to keep an eye on the chat for us, and she'll let us know when questions pop in. Um, so that pre-service teacher permit, it is in place. Um, the other thing that was in House Bill 33 allows granted permission for teachers to teach two grade bands outside of the grade bands that are listed on their license. So, for example, a PK5 teacher can teach up through seventh grade under House Bill 33. And it also changed the grade bands. Now you're going to look at this and as I did and go, wait, there's a mistake here. Somebody else put these slides together for us. House Bill 33 changed the grade bands to PK8 and 612. And that's why we have the two asterisks there because it was corrected. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then the temporary substitute teaching license was part of House Bill 33. And I'm going to turn that part of this discussion over to my colleague, Curtis, who is the expert in all things licensure. So, Curtis, can you talk a little bit about the temporary substitute teaching license?
Sure. The temporary substitute teaching license was created initially during COVID. It was a non renewable license. and it was good for school districts to use individuals who do not hold a bachelor's degree but hold at least a high school diploma. And with House Bill 33, it made that permanent. So that is another option for school districts to use. Those credentials are specific to the actual district that signs off on the applicant. Unlike the traditional substitute license, you can get it from a district and then go and use it in any district in the state of Ohio. The temporary substitute teaching license is valid only in the district in which the superintendent signs it. And that superintendent is responsible for making sure that that individual would have any appropriate professional development that they provide, either for their substitutes in general or specific professional development that was created for those individuals who don't hold a bachelor's degree but do have this temporary substitute license.
Thanks, Curtis.
Mhm.
The last point for us to talk about here was that House Bill 33 required those that hold pupil activity permits to receive training in mental health for working with the students that they um, serve with that pupil activity permit.
And
So,
then before you go on, there was
yes,
one question in the chat about the pre-service teacher permits.
yes.
The question is, students who already hold an active credential issued by the State Board of Education, Ohio, including educational aid permit, substitute teaching license, don't need the permit if okay with the EPP. Is that correct?
That is correct. And whoever placed that into the chat, thanks for bringing that to everyone's attention. Yes, if you already hold a credential issued by the State Board of Education, then the college student does not need to obtain the pre-service teacher permit. So thank you for bringing that to make sure that we discussed that this morning. Okay, so moving on to current, more recent legislation and some new administrative rules that the state board is proposing or having put into place. I wanted to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 168. And so a lot of Ohio Revised Code citations placed there, but Senate Bill 168 allows school districts to use a teacher evaluation framework created by the district as an alternative to OTES 2.0. And so we want to make sure that you're aware that your district has the opportunity to do that. Um, the State Board of Education is just here to we're here to tell you that you have the right to do that. And what we have been suggesting to school districts that have contacted us about whether or not this is truly something that they can do is we've been advising school districts to consult your collective bargaining agreement and consult with your legal counsel in regards to implications that may have for teacher evaluation and teacher renewal or dismissal. But the Senate Bill 168 has created the opportunity for school districts to create their own framework for teacher evaluation. Um, was there a question there? Okay. So one of the things that we are currently working on right now is the renewal or conversion of teaching licenses. And so Senate Bill 168 contains language that is really the first time that this has ever been allowed or a possibility in the state when it comes to licensure. And the language that was in the bill states that a candidate, a fully licensed teacher, so this is not available for someone coming out of an educator preparation program. This is only available to someone who holds a current teaching license in the state of Ohio. When their license comes up for renewal, they have the opportunity to do two different things. They can renew their license as it currently exists. So they could renew it whatever grade bands are currently on their teaching license, they can choose to just renew that license as it currently exists, or they can choose to convert it to one of the to the grade bands that exist now as part of House Bill 33 and slash Senate Bill 168, which corrected the grade bands to being pre-K 8 and 7-12. And the reason that they did that was that you may recall that if grade 6 appeared on a teaching license, then it required all of the reading hours, and so they corrected it. They made the correction to make it 7-12, so that 7-12 teachers don't have to do those hours. So license comes up for renewal, keep it as it is, or convert it to a PK8 or a 7-12 license. Now, we have written an administrative rule, as our chief legal counsel says, much more eloquently than I will put it. The legislature writes code and says this is what the law is going to be, and then it's left to us to interpret that and create rules for how to implement the law as it has been written by the legislature. And so, as an agency, we've decided to propose some guidelines for how you can go about converting your license. And the reason was that, let's use, for example, if I was a 7-12 physics teacher, and for some crazy reason, I decided that I wanted to go get a PK8 license and I wanted to become a first grade teacher. We felt that there should be some guidelines in place for you can't just automatically. And so if you're going to convert your license, the easiest way to put it is we're going to require you to go through the same assessments that someone would have to do coming out of college in order to obtain that license. So if you were going to move from 7-12 to a PK8, you're going to have to take the Foundations of Reading 190 test, and you're also going to have to take the content test for early childhood education. Similarly, if you currently hold a 4.9 license and you decided that you wanted to transition it to a 7-12 license, then you're going to have to pass the content test in whichever one of your two areas that currently exist on your middle school license, or both. If you chose to want to obtain two 7-12 licenses, you're going to have to pass like content tests that are required for to obtain that license. So that rule is up for public comment right now. You can find it at our website, and it'll be up until January 9th for public comment. The state board heard a first reading of it this week, and our plan is to have them vote on that at the January board meeting so that we can then take it forward for the next step in the legislative review process and get that in place for hiring season. So kind of a complicated process, but once again, you can read the rule at our website and see it in writing as to what we're asking of people to convert their license. Kate, are there any questions in the chat about that yet?
One question, but you addressed it in your explanation, so we're good.
Okay, great. So the third bullet point, as I said, the Senate Bill 168 corrected the grade bands to PK8 and 7-12. The other thing that Senate Bill 168 did was it included school counselors into the consistently high performing status that has impact upon their evaluation cycles and what they have to do for evaluation. And one thing that we did leave out of this slide that I just realized is it had been a problem for districts that if you had a teacher that was teaching 2 grade bands out of their license prior to Senate Bill 168, they were not considered to be properly certified, but Senate Bill 168 makes them properly certified if they're teaching 2 grade bands outside of their license. The last bullet point that we have here is that the state board has already approved. We created an interim resident educator license. And this is a license that's available at the request of the school district for a candidate. And so it's going to require signature from the district. And then it's also going to require signature from the university that the candidate has successfully completed an educator preparation program. This license is really available for candidates that haven't been able to pass one or more of their licensure exams, but they've scored at least a 206 on the test that they can't pass, 220 being passing in the state of Ohio for all tests that are required for licensure. So the interim resident educator license, if I was looking at my screen, I see someone from Cincinnati Public Schools here. So Cincinnati has someone that maybe's been subbing for them, and they aren't able to pass their licensure exams to be issued their license. But Cincinnati says, we think that this is a really high quality candidate, and we want them to be able to move on to the teacher pay scale. We want them to get this license. So Cincinnati can request this license for this candidate, provided that they have a 206 or above. They must have passed the APK or EdTPA, the pedagogy court exams in the state. So they have to pass those, because we want to make sure that this candidate really knows how to teach. They're just struggling with the content area. And if they have that 206, they can apply. It's a 1-year license, renewable 2 times. So they can hold it for 3 years. They have to renew it, obviously, every year. And during those 3 years, they have to be part of the district's resident educator program. They have to pass RESA, and they have to be fully evaluated all 3 years. And in 2 out of the 3 years, they have to be at the skilled or accomplished level. If at the end of 3 years they've met all of those criteria, then the candidate can transition their license to a 5-year professional license. Any questions about that, Kate?
A couple of questions for the earlier conversation about the changing of the teacher licensures, the conversion of the grade bands. One being, are there any considerations or conversations about an alternative to the exams to demonstrate mastery and be able to teach those grade bands?
Great question. We've spent a lot of time thinking about that, looking at that. We really believe, if you've heard the state superintendent speak at all, his line always is that the State Board of Education's responsibility is to make sure that all 1.6 million school children in the state of Ohio have a highly qualified teacher to be in the classroom, and someone that demonstrates good moral character and judgment. And so we have discussed this a lot. We've researched other states, and we still believe that a licensure exam is appropriate. There is research out there. There are many articles that I've read about the fact that having a licensure exam is something that is appropriate to make sure you've got qualified people in the classroom. We are having some conversations about what the OAEs could look like or might look like, but there are no plans at all to do away with licensure exams in the state.
Okay. Another question around, in terms of being able to change your licensure bands, is that something teachers can do now, or is this on hold until those kind of parameters and guidelines are set?
It's on hold right now until we get the rule in place. And once again, it's only at the time that your license comes up for renewal. So if your license isn't up for renewal for another 3 years, you can't convert to one of the new bands until it is actually time for that license to be renewed. But we'll have it in place for, in plenty of time for people whose licenses are expiring at the end of June and need to renew. It'll be available in plenty of time for them to be able to make the conversion.
And then a final question about interim alternative, or is there going to be an interim alternative resident educator license option coming?
No, there hasn't been any discussion about an alternative interim license. Part of the reason that the interim license, with traditionally trained teachers was they had gone through that traditional training of teacher preparation program, which an alternatively licensed person does not do. So there hasn't been any discussion or forward thinking about doing anything for an alternative interim license. Essentially, there are two things they have to do that is to take and pass the test and do the IPTI. So those are two things that have to be completed, which are quite different than completing a traditional teacher preparation program.
And then another question about when will the interim resident educator license be available?
Oh, it'll be available. It'll be dated for July 1, 2025. So it'll be available for candidates to apply for that sometime in the spring. We're working on it right now. Really close to having it ready to go through our IT program. So it'll be available shortly, and we'll make sure that it's communicated broadly to the field that the license is now available for candidates to apply for.
And another plug for the newsletter. All the updates are always in there, so subscribe. And one final question, has there been any discussion on changing the GPA requirement for alternative licensing?
There hasn't been any discussion about that. A little background on that. Prior to the most recent change to the alternative, we looked for a specific number of content hours in the area that the person was requesting the alternative, and they had to have a GPA of 2.5 within just the content area. When the legislature did away with the requirement of actually having any actual content coursework in the area you're requesting, the GPA stretched out to include the whole bachelor's degree or master's degree. So, no, we haven't had any discussions about changing or lowering the GPA for the alternative resident educator with regard to a bachelor's degree or a master's degree.
Okay, so Kate said that there were lots of questions about supplemental pathways and multi-age career technical supplemental teaching licenses, and so I'm going to turn that over to Curtis to talk a little bit about pathways to licensure.
So the supplemental pathway is a mechanism for a person who is licensed in one area already. So you may be licensed in um, early childhood education, and you have a district that might have an intervention specialist position that they cannot fill. So what that allows the district and the educator to do is to come to an agreement and say, okay, I'm interested in that position. I don't have a license in it. How can I work towards getting full licensure? And that is what the supplemental pathway is for. So if a person is placed into a position outside of the area in which they're already licensed, they must pass that content test for the area in the supplemental licensure. And then they must work at least 2 years on that supplemental in that area. Some individuals are required coursework. For example, if I were let's say a 7 through 12 adolescent to young adult person and I moved to intervention or middle childhood or even early childhood or PK5, there is a requirement for 12 semester hours of reading with 3 hours in phonics. So that requirement is a separate statute. So that still has to be completed. So those individuals sometimes do have to take some additional coursework, but For the most part, we find most people don't have to do any additional coursework unless they're going way outside of their standard licensure area. But essentially, at the end of the 2 years, if they've worked 2 years, taken whatever coursework may be required, they can apply for full licensure in that area. The supplemental allows them to be in the resident educator program. We do provide an evaluation for applicants. So once they're hired and the initial supplemental has been issued, they can request us to do an evaluation so they know whether or not excuse me, whether or not there's any additional coursework they need to do over that 2-year period. I might also mention they can have a total of 3. So if someone, for some reason, would need the full 12 semester hours as an example of the reading coursework, they could have and hold 3 supplemental licenses. So there could be the initial supplemental and 2 renewals. We do, however, find that most people complete that pathway within 2 years and move on to the standard license after the second year of teaching.
Curtis, you want to just talk about the checklist? I know it went with what you were talking about before.
Yeah, the checklist is something that applicants can get off of our website, and it basically outlines what they need to submit to us in the process of working through the supplemental license for the initial license. And it just is a step-by-step instruction. We found that sometimes providing these checklists for different types of credential have been helpful to educators so that they have a one-stop place to go to see what criteria and what things they need to do to fulfill the requirements.
So that's all we had for you. There's our contact informations. If you have questions about evaluation, whether it's OTES, OPES, or OSES, you can send it to the evaluation at sboe.ohio.gov mailbox. If you have questions about the RE program, Resident Educator Program, you can send those to that mailbox. And if you have questions about licensure, there's the licensure mailbox. One thing that I did want to mention, those of you that pay close attention to the legislature or budget requests and those things, you may have seen some that the State Board of Education has requested through our budget bill that RESA be eliminated, not the RE program. We are fully committed to mentoring and the RE program, but we have requested through the budget process that the resident educator summative assessment be eliminated. And so stay tuned to that. The RE team is proceeding as though RESA will be in place come next fall because we won't know until the budget bill is finally signed off in July whether or not that actually takes place. So we do need to proceed as though RESA will be in place for next fall, but we have requested that it be eliminated. So stay tuned for further developments there. So Kate, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
There was a question, if you could go back to the first slide that had all of your individual contact information. These slides will also be posted on the Human Capital Resource Center along with the recording. So all of these links and information that they shared, you'll be able to see through the website, and we'll share that as well. Um, and we will send out a note once that information is available. I want to let you know that we have updated the website with trainings for the winter. So do encourage you to go check out some of our upcoming trainings as well. We've got our first networking session for next year coming up on January 30th on recruiting a diverse workforce with guests from both the Camera and Dream teams who've really made that a focus of their work. We also have a series of HC trainings, and you have the option to do those virtually or in person. So the in person will be full day, one at Hamilton County in March, and one at ESC of Northeast Ohio in February, whereas the virtual ones will be broken up into 1 hour chunks over a 6-week span. So depending on your learning preferences, you have a lot of options available to you. Any other questions for the licensure team while we have them here.
Maybe. This is Lori Ruffert from PPS, I think. You can hear me? You
Yes,
haven't
we can
either
hear
issues. Okay. So I do have a question on your properly certified. So first, thank you for all of this. It helps clarify some of the stuff that we see on the website. But my question is, with the properly certified, it still reports though to EMIS that they're not properly certified. Because we're having that issue right now. I have 3 teachers that we have following the um, guidelines for properly certified, but it's still hitting as a fatal error on an EMIS report. So not sure how, that's actually working, to help the district. While it helps us staff some classrooms, we're still getting, like I said, that hit on our EMIS report.
Have you put a ticket in for the help desk for EMIS?
I just started talking to our EMIS coordinator because I said, this is what it says that we can do. But I don't know if there's like a, like we can do that with career tech for the middle childhood aid grades. So
Right.
I was just curious of that because I know a couple years ago you could do it, but it still hit us on EMIS. So I don't know if that had changed or not.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I know I saw you unmute yourself, Stephanie, and I know properly certified is one of the areas responsible for.
Here. Sorry, Stephanie. I didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, you're fine. So the reason that's happening is because our the department is still figuring out how to make those changes in EMIS. So those like the EMIS reports that you're getting now are still coming out automatically. And so we haven't had a chance to put those changes into EMIS yet. So um I think January, February, when those like reports come out, that should be up to date with the like the new proper cert rules, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay. Yeah. So we're still working out those like guidelines, those rules in EMIS. So it's still kind of it's showing that they may not meet proper certification, but like once we get those changes made in EMIS, because it is a process, then it will come out with the correct rules.
Okay, good. Thank you. I will let our EMIS person know. Because we have we have, I think 3 of them right now, but I'm sure we could use more. But thank you.
Any other questions from anyone on the call? All right. Well, with that, I thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned, we'll be sharing the slides and the recording through the Human Capital Resource Center. You also get a follow-up email once that is available. And if you have any questions, you have our contact information, and you'll see that in the slides as well. So thank you so much for your time today, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thanks.